Welcome Waste Builders to the first of our online event series, WasteBuild 365. We're all about with WasteBuild 365 sharing inspiring circular content, but also being a facilitator for those new business meetings that have really dried up since coronavirus lockdown began. And to that end, when you signed up, you will have been given the opportunity to enter some preferences. And it's not too late to change those or to add them all together. And I really would encourage you to do so, because it's based on those responses that we're able to set up 3 or 4 really valuable meetings for you at the end of this session. The first one is with ProRail, and we're talking about how they're scaling up their circular ambitions despite the coronavirus lockdown. They've got some ambitious 2050 targets to be net zero carbon, and also they're trying to make the network circular. A few housekeeping points on the event. On the right hand side you'll see the presentation slides, and on the left you'll see the presenters. You can enlarge the slides by clicking on them at any point and click on them again to reduce. On the right hand side also is a Q&A button. So if you click on the Q&A and submit any questions, do feel free to do that at any point. You may want to @ the speaker's name, just so that if we can't answer them there and then, we'll be able to come back to you after the event when we can answer them. There are also a few polls, and I'd really appreciate it if you engage with those polls and give us your responses. Not only will it help us shape these events as we go forwards and find out what's working and what isn't perhaps, but also we'll know who's out there listening and watching and engaging with the content. And I think that's it from me. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to our chair, David Greenfield from the Circular Economy Club. David, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Fraser. Good morning to everybody in the UK and good afternoon to everybody in Europe. Really pleased to be chairing today's session. Circular economy and circular infrastructure is one of the things I spend a lot of my time talking about and trying to put into practice. So I'm really honoured to take the first WasteBuild 365 and to hear from some wonderful speakers that you can see on the right hand side of your screen. I'm just going to introduce each of them very briefly now, and then we're going to go straight into the content, because fundamentally that's all you want to hear. You want to hear what's going on. So our speakers today, Katja Nielsen from ProRail, who works as Circular Ambassador for ProRail. Her goal is to help in making the change in rethinking the use of materials towards a closed loop. She knows it's not easy, and there are too many unused opportunities, which is a brilliant approach. I think we all know that circular has lots of opportunities. In many cases, they're not utilised enough. Joining Katja will be Eva Jakemba from ProRail, dedicated to use her skills. She's going to tell me off for mispronouncing her surname in a second. Dedicated to using her skills as designer to contribute towards the defining challenge of our time, which is, of course, climate change. Within ProRail, she is the green innovator, and she focuses on 2 big questions. What can the role of the rail be in the transition towards clean mobility? And how can we reduce the footprint of the rail infrastructure, including the stations? Massive questions which, from a carbon, from a material perspective, have huge implications on the future of our planet. 2 of the partners that ProRail are working with, one is Tinker van Heuvel from Studio Way, who started her own company in 2017 and is a circular product developer and producer of flooring products for offices and parks. I love this statistic. She has already made an impact of 5,500 tons of CO2 in the past 3 years, and over 1,000 tons of material offset, which is brilliant. And our final partner is Christian van Maren, who's one of the founders of the Excess Materials Exchange. He's got a diverse background, ex-aerospace, and a life-changing trip to the Antarctica, can't get those 2 wrong. And then Christian decided to dedicate his skills to creating a more sustainable economy. He's done that by running the National Capital and Green Infrastructure Program for Shell in North and South America. And it was there that he realized that circular economy is one of the fastest, if not cheapest way to get the Paris Climate Agreement targets delivered. And this motivated him to start the excess materials exchange together with Mayaka Damon. So they're our speakers. As I said, I'm from the Circular Economy Club. I'm really pleased and really happy that we're supporting this event today. So we're going to go straight into our presentations. I'm going to invite Ava and Katja to tell us all about ProRail.
Hello everybody, my name is Katja. I'm going to tell you a little bit about ProRail's goals and our circular ambitions. Next slide please, yes. First of all, what do we do in the Netherlands? We build and maintain all the railway paths in the Netherlands, and we build and maintain all the stations in the Netherlands. And underneath left you can see our beautiful new station of Rotterdam. But also what we do is we make sure we take care of all the traffic control. So if anything goes wrong in one of the rail paths, we have to change that immediately. So that's a big and responsible function of ProRail. And last but not least, we do all the capacity allocation. We have kind of 4 or 5 passenger transport carriers, but also over 35 freight transport carriers. And we have to make sure that everybody gets his fair share of using the railways. Next, please. Yeah. Our mission statement of ProRail is in English, going, growing, and green. And going is all about improving our mobility for the future. We, for example, want to be competitive with all the shorter aviation traffic, because we think it's really good possible to, or it must be possible in the future to go by train from Amsterdam to Berlin, for example, or to London, and not by flying anymore. So that's part of our model shift. It's very important. Growing is all about the reliability of our performance and getting more trains. Holland is a small country and we are full with all the infrastructure. So we want to make sure we will have on the same tracks, we will have more trains. And of course, green is all about sustainability, and I will tell you a little bit more about that. This is our roadmap for our sustainability goals. And first of all is there the mobility. And that's all about the model shift. That's all about what I just said, from how can we get more passengers choosing the train instead of, for example, cars or even planes. And that is why that for us it's very important to get more connection with other European countries and cities to make good traffic paths to those cities, so we can be competitive with all the planes. And even now with COVID, we have shown all together that it's not necessary to fly over to everywhere. So we want to make part of this possibility to make a change after COVID, and the world is getting hopefully kind of normal again, but in a new way. Then we have, if we look to our own footprint, we have 3 themes which we focus on. First of all, there is energy. We want to make sure we need less energy, of course. We already use green energy, but also we want to make sure that we get our own energy through windmills and solar systems in all kinds of possible ways in ProRail's transportation paths. Also, we own a lot of nature in Holland. The infrastructure is always connected to nature, and we want to make sure our plants and animal species who belong in a part of our country will not be disturbed by our work and our being there. So we want to help them as much as we can for using to maintain the biodiversity, for example. And last but not least, materials. We use a lot of materials in our rail path, and we have some goals of circularity. Maybe you can go to the next slide. We use a lot of raw materials, for example, concrete, steel, ballast, in lots and lots of tons. And we have two big challenges in a circular way. First of all, that's from the past to the current situations, is how can we reuse all the materials we already have in a as high as much as possible level. And the other thing is, how can we change the way we do things and the way we invent our materials and our rail paths, so the circularity in the future will improve and gives us more possibilities for reusing in the same function or maybe in another function. And we have some challenges ahead of us, because our goal for the total rail organization in the Netherlands is to be climate neutral and circular in 2050. We try to be faster than that, but that's really our ambition. And we have examined our situation, and we see that if we maintain our current improvement of the way we do things, we won't be able to measure to our ambitions. So we have to be faster and we have to scale up more. And for that, we, together with Rijkswaterstaat, they're responsible for the infrastructure of the road and waterways in the Netherlands. And with the ministry, we made a strategy towards climate neutral and circular infra projects. And this strategy needs to help us to scale up and to get to our ambitions faster, as we are doing at this time. And we have 4 major paths on which we do so. The traction supply system, so that's all about all the energy the railways need. Construction sites and logistics is all about being having zero emission with all the material our constructors work with. The permanent way, those are all the big and heavy materials we use in concrete and steel and everything. And the structures are underpasses, bridges, and railway arches, which uses a lot of materials too. So these are the paths we focus on to be able to make changes and have a lot of innovations going on, because we need changes and those innovations to achieve our goals of being climate neutral and circular. And now Eva will take over, and she's going to tell you more about everything around all the innovations and also the things we do with EME and with Inke's company.
Yes, thank you, Katja. As David already said, my name is Eva Dijkema, which is a very Dutch name, so I don't blame you for pronouncing it wrong. As Katja said, we really need some paradigm shifts and system changes to be able to achieve the goals that we actually set. So we really see that innovation and sustainability are going hand in hand and need to come together. And I would like to give you some examples of projects that we already started with in order to reach those ambitions. One of the projects that we started last year is a pilot project we did with sustainable sleepers, because sleepers are made of concrete right now. And we rethought this and thought, okay, is it really needed to always use concrete there, or can we also use some other type of material that is maybe more sustainable, more easy to recycle, more easy to get circular? We asked the market, do you have any alternatives? And they said, yes, we have, but your rules and regulations, they prevent us from being able to use them. So that was quite an eye-opener for us, and we started to look into our rules and regulations, and we decided to make a pilot project where we use different types of sleepers, do a high-frequency monitoring there, and see if they really work very well. Why can we not also change maybe our rules and regulations on sleepers, and make sure that we describe what we want from those sleepers in a functional way instead of saying it must be a concrete sleeper, for example. So that's one of the examples that we are working on right now. Another example is a collaboration that we started with a small company called NECCECITY, and they use dredge or like mud from the ditches to make sort of a concrete-like material. It's 100% bio-based, and we really like to start experimenting what can we do with this material. They won our bio-based challenge that we launched last year. As you can see on the upper left part of the slide, I'm giving them their prize in a digital way. And of course, a very good example of one of the projects that we started is the collaboration we have with Studio Way, where we looked into a circular or 76% circular actually tile for our stations. And I shouldn't be explaining too much about that because we have Tinke here in the house, and she will explain all about her company and what we did together actually. So I would love to give the word to Tinke for this part of the presentation. And Tinke, you're still on mute.
Hi, I'm Tinke van den Heuvel from Studio Way. Next, please. I make design with impact. I used to be, one back, please. I used to be a scrap dealer for 14 years working for my father. And there I actually learned that you can actually make a value from waste. Next, please. Now I started my company in 2017. Now I actually focus on circular concrete, circular flooring, and circular wall tiles. What I think is very important that you reuse your materials. Next, please. The necessity of circular economy. Our government wants our resources to be reused into 50-50 completely. The linear facts are that there is an exponential growth in the population and therefore a growth in demand of resources. And in 2050, the resources of the construction will be dried up. The circular fact that we can help with is that there is less independence for resources. Like if you reuse your resources from debris or your old pavement, you don't need to buy it from elsewhere. Therefore, the good thing about it is that you have less CO2 and the mining for resources will be less as well, which is all better for the environment and the climate. Next, please. Yeah, what we do is we make circular carpets. They are modular, circular, and we make them with social impact. These are especially for projects for offices and so on. We have big collaborations with dealers like Royal Iron, Gispe, Contour Circular, and a lot more companies. The good thing about this is we have collaborations with Interface, Taket, and Forbo, the three big sustainable frontrunners on production of carpet tiles. And what we do, we make from their production waste, we make new modular carpet tiles or carpets. And that is reuse, and reuse is always better than recycling. Next, please. We also work with social responsibility. I sit here in the old prison. We have about 1,000 square meters where we have the full production for our carpets. And we work with Syrian refugees, so they also have a chance to integrate here in Utrecht. and we have them on the payroll, so it's not a subsidized project. Next, please. In 2017, I started making a recipe for circular concrete. And of course, I wanted to make a special design, because I find that there is a lot of talking about circular economy, but a lot of consumers just want a product that looks cool. So I focused on the ingredients to be circular, but the looks should be just an awesome product. So yeah, this way I make desirable products that make impact, but the consumer are not really conscious about it. In 2017, I also met with Eva, and I met her on the Dutch Design Week. And we discussed if there is a possibility to have a collaboration with ProRail. Next, please. That actually turned into our first circular platform in Bunde. And that was a really awesome project, because we took the old pavement from another platform. We've recycled the pavement, and in this way we could recycle about 93% of the resources, and 76% of these resources are reused in our concrete tiles. Next, please. Here you see the old tile from ProRail and the new one from Studio Way. They have a really rough quality. We can make them in any size. We have about 60 different sizes now, but for ProRail we developed a tile that has round edges and a little bit more spaces in between, so it also has a good drainage. Yeah, it's really awesome product that can actually catch all the sustainability goals that ProRail has. The next, please. In this project, we have a reduction of CO2 of 1,119 tons of CO2, and a reduction of resources of 353,000 kilos of new resources that we spared. And this is in the 3 platforms that we did now for ProRail. We did one in Bunde, Maarn, and Etteleur. And we are now developing a blind guidance line, which is also for 76% made of recycled resources. Next, please. Yeah, circular. What do I see as a circular product? Circular means that there is a take-back system. We do that obviously with our concrete, because all our products are recyclable endlessly. So once the platforms are at the end of life, we can take them back and recycle them into resources again and create new concrete tiles out of them. But also the material that we cut, for example, here, all the cutting edges, they will be collected and sent back to the producers, and they recycle the material again. Also, the end-of-life material can be sent back to Studio Way, and we check if we can refurbish it. If not, they will be recycled by the producers. Also, the complete production is in the Netherlands. All the resources are from the Netherlands. And yeah, we are always looking for partners or collaborations where we can make a difference in their circular sustainabilities. Next, please. Yeah, if you want to know more about how the process went with ProRail, you can always contact me, or if you have your own project that you want to make circular, you can contact us. Thank you.
Thanks, Tinka. I think that's a great story and an awesome product indeed that we developed. And of course, I think this was all very like a nice story. but it's not always just nice. It's also sometimes really hard, I think, to get these things going.
Yeah.
It can be, and I think this would be also a nice part to get some feedback from the audience. What are your experience as, for example, being a startup or a small new company in working with big partners like ProRail or other government-based companies? Do you have any experiences on that? We would love to hear those. From our side, I would like to say that, yeah, sometimes it's hard as a big corporate to work with a new startup because, yeah, we're just used to like work with the companies that we've always worked with, and we know them, we know their quality, and then all of a sudden there's this new kid on the block that says, hey, my product is good as well. How to deal with that? And I think that's my job in the innovations department to get this in a pilot and make sure that other people see it, but then really getting the product introduced and making sure that it's not only a pilot, but that we can really scale it up. That is often really hard. Tinke, is that also what you experienced?
Yeah, I think for us as a startup, ProRail, of course, has the function of launching customer in such a good way. Like we get we can really do big quantities, and we can really prove that our product works. But you have to have a group internally that is very motivated and wants to work with your product. So it also takes a lot of time to get the constructors that actually put the pavement in the on the platform, to have them with you. You have to get the legal part from ProRail with you, and that's a long way. What I think went really well with ProRail is that they were really willing to give us the opportunity to prove that our material was good. But the next levels are, how do we keep it going? Because they work with tenders, like they have tenders for like the coming 5 years. How do you get your product into those projects that are already written to a constructor, and that is a very big challenge, I think. Yeah, and to not only let it be a pilot, but just to get all the platforms circular.
Yeah, exactly. To make this the new normal, as we say.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I don't know, David, do we have any responses from the audience on this already? Is David still there?
I saw one question about us. I was telling that we want to be competitive with the planes, and there was a question that said, "Don't you want to work together, cooperate with the
airlines?"
Yeah. So yes, it's both. At first, that's all. It has to do with the law and everything, and taxes. Is the train is at the moment very often much more expensive. So for travelers, that can be hard, and it takes more time. So we want to be more competitive with being having faster tracks in Europe, and having less expensive railway tracks in Europe. And that's what I meant with being competitive. But yes, of course, we, as a part of the total infrastructure, we have to work together also. And we also need to get in touch with airlines to make good connections also by where the train stops and where airlines begin. So it works both ways.
And we also can learn a lot still from airlines, because I mean, booking an international train ticket is hell, and we can, I think, learn from airlines in that sense.
Thank you, Eva. My computer decided that it didn't want to work with, so I'm now on my mobile phone using 4G. The wonders of technology. We have had one question, which I'm going to ask you to just address very briefly, and then I think we better crack on with section. So it was around circular concrete. What is circular concrete, and what measures have to be in place for the sand, unhydrated cement, and pebbles to be recycled back into virgin materials? Fundamentally, concrete is a very strong material. So what do you have to do to make it circular?
Yeah, I think I will get back on that. Circular concrete is, we use debris or old pavement that we actually break into really small fragments. And so a part of the pebbles will be retrieved, but also a very fine debris will be used as sand. We still use 24% non-circular material, which means a part of it is not recycled sand yet. And that has to do with the binding of the material. Now we use partly circular cement and partly non-circular cement. And cement is obviously the biggest problem in the CO2, of course. So we are looking into using maybe other binding materials, but for now we use 50% non-circular and 50% circular cement.
Okay, brilliant. We've got quite a few questions coming in, but what I'd like to do is to ask Eva and Katja to just talk about the next example, and then we'll pick up these questions in the Q&A at the end. So thank you very much, Tinka. It's lovely hearing from you. Eva and Katja, back over to you about case study number 2, working with Christian and the excess materials exchange.
Yes, indeed. So we talked about recycling a lot. Also, Tinka mentioned reuse, and that is often, it's actually always better to reuse first, see what you can reuse first, and then if it's not possible to recycle. So this reuse part is also something that we really pay a lot of attention to, and we really want to see what are the products that we can actually reuse within our system, and also what are the challenges there. Why is it sometimes hard to reuse products? And that's why we started collaborating with EME, Excess Material Exchange, and we decided to start a pilot with an internal circular marketplace just within ProRail first, on only 3 materials, and that's the materials you see here. So it's ballast, sleepers, concrete sleepers still, and the track itself, so the steel track. But we hope in the future we can expand this and see if we can add other materials, and also if we can open up the marketplace maybe for other partners as well. But for this, I also would like to give the floor to Christian, and he will tell us about EME, how they started, what it is, and also how the collaboration with ProRail started, I think. So Christian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eva. Until what time do I have? Till 40?
Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay, perfect. Thanks. And it's really great to be a part of this webinar. ProRail has been one of our sort of launching customers. It's wonderful to be a part of this. Really one of our favorite clients. I'm not lying. Like David said, I'm Christian Vermaren. I'm one of the founders of EME. We started this about 4 years ago, and I think honestly our relationship with ProRail has already been 3 years old now, so you're really there from the start. And we like to describe ourselves as a dating site for secondary materials and waste. Next slide. And what we try to do is position ourselves in between the sellers of these materials, the buyers, but also with what we like to call value-added providers. So this could be logistical service providers, knowledge institutes, tech providers, but also governments and legal and financial institutes. Basically, all the different parties that we see are required to make matches happen. Next slide. And just briefly on our vision and mission, I mean, David already mentioned the reason why Micah and I started this company is really because we wanted to sort of maximize the impact that we can have. And we really found that the circular economy is, like the way I see it now, maybe one of the best avenues to, as they call it these days, build it back better and really reduce the impact that we have, and actually also saving money. I think it's almost a no-brainer in that sense. Next slide. And what we've learned in the last 4 years is to use the following approach, where we give excess material flows and waste and identity using something called the resources passport. You can see there a small picture on the side. But because, you know, I think data storage and management is really key when it comes to the circular economy. You need to know what materials are out there, in which quality, et cetera, et cetera. But also what we add to that is what we call intelligence. And what we're building, which I think is quite exciting, is a sort of semantic web for the circular economy, linking all sorts of attributes to the material streams that we analyze, also including the embedded impact, the environmental impact, and also what we're working on right now, the social impact. And for that, we're working together with the EY and PRE consultants from Amersfoort. And then also the integration piece, where we don't just want to match within industries, but also within sector or outside of sector boundaries and industry boundaries as well. Next slide. I'm going through it a bit fast, looking at the clock, but these slides will be made available so you can read it maybe at your own pace afterwards. And what we've built to facilitate that approach is the resources passport, which we store there where necessary using blockchain technology, which really helps also in sort of reducing the cost of transaction. A triple valuation methodology where we give waste streams a financial value, an environmental value, and a social value. So that can really help in the sort of data-driven decision making. Add to that tracking and tracing technology, so you can really match the digital twin with the real life objects and assets, which help on the one hand converge to being a bit more trustworthy, because then it is, you know where something is, so it becomes a bit more difficult to game the system, if you will, but also really helps you to see where certain materials are being released. And then lastly, our matchmaking engine, which is for one part based on blockchain, but also mostly facilitated by a whole suite of AI technologies, so artificial intelligence technologies, combined with our own intelligence, which is not so artificial. And that it really helps us, all these things combined, to solve a couple of challenges that there are in the transition to the circular economy, being around mostly cost of transaction and information asymmetry and transparency. Next slide. What is interesting to highlight is that we did a pilot together with ProRail where we matched about 70,000 tons of materials in 2018 and 2019. So 70,000 tons weighs about as much as 7 Eiffel Towers. And we found that the matches that we identified for these material streams had a financial value of 64 million euros per year. And if we would dive into the environmental impact that we could save with these matches, we found that the energy that you could save, you could power the public lights in Paris with for 5 years. You could fill 860 Olympic swimming pools with the water that you would save. And the CO2 emissions that we could save with these matches, you could basically drive the whole city of Amsterdam to Milan, which is 860,000 times. And we work with some of the partners that you see on the right-hand side. And what we saw in that pilot is that the financial impact is quite large, as you can see here, but also that really the environmental impact is quite significant. So that really helped us move forward with our platform and gave us hope, basically, that we're on the right track. Next slide. A couple of examples. We found that you can use railroad tracks as construction beams. It actually is being done at a small scale in Utrecht, which is some example that I really like. We also found that you can turn synthetic clothing, outdoor clothing, into carpeting, railroad sleepers into walls, but also into anti-terrorism blocks, which are becoming more and more popular, unfortunately. So these are the blocks that you put next to roads. And then also, and this is what we're doing now with ProRail, is reusing elements in the same function. Next slide. And the products that we've built around that to sort of help this stage of the transition is doing quick scans to really assess what the circular potential is, quote unquote, of certain material streams. 4D matchmaking, where we do the whole matchmaking of supply and demand. And then what we're now also doing for ProRail is the internal circular marketplace, where we facilitate matchmaking of materials within a certain organization, within the same function. Next slide. This is what the team looks like. Just gonna skip over that, but you can read about it later. But half our team is here in the Netherlands, half the team is in India doing all the development of the IT. Next slide. And this is what the marketplace currently looks like. Can basically facilitate any type of material. has any basic marketplace functionality that you would like, that you are used to, maybe from eBay or Marktplaats.nl. And then next slide. This is where what the passport looks like, where you can see a picture on the top left side, contact details on the right, location, some basic information on the left, and then at the bottom, more detailed information. Also, the users are able to shield off that information, because we often see that that's a requirement. Obviously, the circular economy requires transparency, but at the same time, we also understand that companies don't necessarily want to share everything with everyone. And our platform helps with that. And we also find that also kind of helps bridge the gap between that sort of dichotomy that we have in keeping information to yourself and the need of the circular economy for transparency. Next slide. And to help our clients in the decision-making process, we've developed an environmental valuation dashboard where you can see on the left-hand side how certain circular solutions score against the current end-of-life situation, on 17 environmental indicators, very basic LCA approach. And then on the right-hand side, we compare the eco cost, which is the sort of the monetary way of expressing the environmental impact that certain matches have on future generations, basically, where you can compare the old situation with the new situation. Next slide. And then also having a financial valuation dashboard where you compare the reuse value, which is often higher, with the recycling value, and also compare it with the current end-of-life situation. And then it has the ability to dive into certain elements that influence that business case, like, for example, which you can see here, the disassembly cost. And I think, yeah, that was my last slide. So I'm a little bit over, but still some time left. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Christian. I'm always loving your presentations because it always makes me go, we need to have a conversation about what's going on in the UK.
Love to.
Right, so, okay, we've got a couple of quick questions, I think, for you, for Ava, and for Katja, in terms of what are the biggest challenges in reusing materials in general, and particularly for ProRail.
Yeah, I would like to add something to the story Christian told us, because when we really believe in the ambitions of EME, and we also see within ProRail we have a big challenge of reusing our own materials in a much better way than it has been done now. And when we wanted to fund the money within ProRail, our higher management asked us, how do you know that this is the best platform, or this is the best company, and this is the way we want to facilitate the reuse of rail materials? I said, I don't know, but we have to learn by doing it, and learn whether a platform like this makes reuse within ProRail much more easy and much better manageable. So we said we really want to get this in practice, and make sure a few of our projects who are in need of secondary materials or have secondary materials, we want to make sure that they are able to get this information in a platform and then see how it helps us. So that's really, the pilot is all about learning together and working together.
And Christian, from your perspective, what challenges have you found working with ProRail? Has it been an easy ride?
Well, you know, like I said at the beginning, ProRail has been one of our favorite clients, and it's kind of surprising because we, at the onset, didn't expect that to work with an organization that is closely linked to the government, that things would happen quickly, or that it would be how do you say it, an easy ride. But surprisingly, we found that it's been one of our more positive and better experiences. And I think it's really due to, I think, a lot of the work that Katja and Eva are doing inside the organization, and getting support across the different departments and functions to sort of, I don't know, preach the circular economy and show the impact that it has. So I think having good ambassadors, I think also to Tinker's point earlier, really helps in a smooth sort of collaboration.
Brilliant. Okay, we've got a couple of questions that are still open on the Q&A, and This one's from Myron, and it's saying, could you elaborate on how much room you have and what the challenges are?
On how much, sorry, on how much what?
How much room you have. And I think this is for Christian in terms of actual physical moving around material, or is this something that ProRail has got dedicated spaces for to allow that excess material exchange to happen?
Well, I think, you know, to touch on that briefly, I mean, we don't have any storage capacity ourselves. We also never at any moment own the materials. I think that for some, you know, also to reduce our liability, but also to keep the liability with ProRail in this case. And I think what we find is that there's already a lot of unused storage space overall where things can be stored for a little bit. But I think really what a platform helps with is by minimizing storage time, or even in some cases eliminating it.
And Myron's just clarified the question, which I interpreted his question. You've answered. Thank you, Christian. It was actually in relation to the tenders. And I suspect this is therefore for Katja and Eva, in terms of what's the flexibility you have on engaging the likes of Studio Way and excess materials exchange, given the fact that you are a very large organization with a lot of, let's say, principles and things already in place.
Yeah, of course, we have a lot of rules around tendering, and we're also bounded to certain rules that we have to apply. But then I always think there's more space than most people know. So we always try to, like what Katja and I do, is try to explain within our company that there's more space to and more space to those standards than a lot of people know, actually. And also to do pilots and to do testing, we have a lot of space. So we can always do that, and then hopefully we can use the testing results or the pilot results to make some changes in specifications of our products, and thereby, for example, create the room in the tenders. So I think that's what we try to do. And maybe Katja, do you have additions?
Yeah, well, the hard part is not in the tendering law, but the hard part is the way we look at it. And our project managers are really used to do their work within time, scope, and money boundaries. And now we ask them to open up those a little bit, and that's the harder part than the tendering part or the tendering law is.
We do get a little bit more freedom now as well from the ministry, which is essentially our main money giver, but also they decide for us which way to go for a little bit, and we get a little bit of more room there. So they say we really want you to be a launching customer as well. Yeah.
And I think maybe from our side, I think also. Sorry.
No, you go.
And maybe also think you can attest to that, but as soon as like a tender becomes a thing, it becomes very difficult, I think, for a startup or starting company to work, because, you know, we don't have a tendering department. We don't have the financial patience, if you will, to wait for the results of that tender 6-9 months from now. So it's, maybe zooming out, it would be very interesting to see if something more structurally could change in that space to make it easier for bigger companies, bigger government-related companies to work with startups like ours.
That's such an important point, Christian, because to a simple tender for somebody like ProRail would actually be 2 or 3 weeks worth of work potentially for a small company. I deal with many small companies that are in exactly that position, that tendering for something is actually probably the worst thing to happen until you get a certain size, which is dangerous. But I think the other point that both Katja and Eva picked up, which for me is so critical, is not just about having some individual champions that are leading. It's about the behavior change and the culture of the organization. And that's one of the things that I suspect we'll have another conversation about, because we're going to need to wrap up now. So I'd just like to say thank you to all of you for your wonderful presentations, for keeping to time, there or thereabouts, all of the questioners. I'm going to hand back to Fraser, who's going to just tell us a little bit about some, as we've been talking about, an excess materials exchange, a dating site. Fraser's going to tell us about his dating site for WasteBuild 365. Thank you all. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Can I say one more thing? Because I think we will be physical. We will be physically present at the WasteBuild event in March. So please come visit us and have these conversations with us there then at that moment, because that's what we love to do with you.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely, as will I think all of us, and we look forward to seeing everybody there. Fraser, back to you.
Many thanks, David. And yeah, thanks everyone. Really enjoyable session, really great content. And yeah, once again, thanks to everyone for your participation. And thanks to you for listening and engaging as well. Now, as David just mentioned, you have the meetings function that's just about to kick off, or in fact, it already has just started. So just below your screen that you're watching, you'll see a Start Meetings button. Click that, and your meetings will just start automatically. I hope they're useful. I hope you've enjoyed this session, and I look forward to speaking to you again at the next WasteBuild 365, which you'll hear all about very shortly. Thanks so much, and I'll speak to you in my meeting soon. Bye then.